Every single day, nearly one-fifth of the world's oil supply passes through a narrow strip of water barely 33 kilometers wide. If this passage suddenly closed, fuel prices around the world could skyrocket overnight, economies could slow, and global trade could face a massive shock. So how did one small waterway become one of the most powerful choke points on Earth? This is the story of the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow corridor that controls the flow of global energy. To understand why the Strait of Hormuz matters so much, we first need to look at where it is. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. It connects the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, and from there to the Arabian Sea and the wider Indian Ocean. At its narrowest point, the strait is only about 33 kilometers wide. But what makes it even more delicate is the shipping lane itself. The actual lanes used by oil tankers are only about 2 miles wide in each direction, with a small buffer zone in between. Despite this narrow passage, it is one of the most heavily used maritime corridors in the world. Every day, massive oil tankers, some of the largest ships ever built, pass through this gateway carrying crude oil from the Middle East to Asia, Europe, and North America. Without the Strait of Hormuz, much of the world's oil simply cannot reach global markets efficiently. The Persian Gulf region contains some of the largest oil reserves on Earth. Countries such as Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran collectively produce tens of millions of barrels of oil every day. And for many of these countries, the Strait of Hormuz is the only major exit route for their oil exports. Imagine the Persian Gulf as a giant basin filled with energy resources. The Strait of Hormuz is essentially the narrow drain at the edge of that basin. Oil from Saudi Arabia's eastern oil fields travels by pipelines to terminals along the Persian Gulf. From there, supertankers load millions of barrels of crude oil and begin their journey. Tankers from Iraq's Basra terminals, Kuwait's export ports, and the UAE's major energy hubs follow the same path. One after another, these ships must pass through the same narrow corridor before they can reach the open ocean. Altogether, around 20 million barrels of oil per day pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That represents roughly 20% of global petroleum consumption. In addition to crude oil, huge shipments of liquefied natural gas, particularly from Qatar, also pass through the strait. For many countries in Asia, including China, India, Japan, and South Korea, this energy supply is absolutely critical. Without it, factories would slow down, transportation systems would struggle, and electricity generation could face major disruptions. Because so much energy flows through one narrow passage, the Strait of Hormuz has become one of the world's most important strategic choke points. In geopolitics, a choke point is a narrow route that controls access to a much larger region. Whoever can influence or disrupt that route holds enormous leverage. The Strait of Hormuz is the perfect example. Unlike oil pipelines on land, shipping routes are difficult to replace quickly. Pipelines that bypass the strait do exist, but they can only carry a small fraction of the total oil exports from the Persian Gulf. For example, Saudi Arabia operates a pipeline that transports oil to the Red Sea, and the United Arab Emirates has a pipeline that leads to the Gulf of Oman. But together, these alternative routes still cannot handle the full volume of oil that normally flows through the strait. This means the global energy market remains heavily dependent on this single maritime passage. Because of that dependence, even the threat of disruption can send shockwaves through global markets. When tensions rise in the region, oil traders often react immediately, pushing prices higher out of fear that supplies could be interrupted. In other words, the Strait of Hormuz doesn't just move oil, it influences the price of energy worldwide. The Strait of Hormuz is not just economically important, it is also located in one of the most politically sensitive regions in the world. At the center of many tensions is Iran, which controls the northern coastline of the strait. Over the years, Iranian leaders have repeatedly warned that if their country is threatened or heavily sanctioned, they could block the strait. While completely shutting it down would be extremely difficult, even limited disruptions could have serious consequences. Iran possesses a variety of tools that could threaten shipping. These include naval mines, fast attack boats, anti-ship missiles, and drones. Even small-scale harassment of oil tankers could slow traffic or raise insurance costs dramatically. Because of these risks, the United States Navy maintains a major presence in the region through the U.S. Fifth Fleet based in Bahrain. Its mission is to help ensure global shipping lanes remain open and secure. Over the years, the Strait of Hormuz has witnessed numerous tense incidents. Oil tankers have been seized, attacked, or damaged during periods of heightened tension. One of the most dramatic periods occurred during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, when both sides targeted oil tankers in what became known as the Tanker War. More recently, damaged ships, drone attacks, and confrontations have again highlighted how fragile this corridor can be. Because the waterway is so narrow, even a single disabled ship could disrupt or partially block the shipping lanes. This constant tension makes the Strait of Hormuz not only a vital economic route, but also a potential flashpoint for global conflict. So what would happen if the strait were suddenly closed? The consequences would likely be immediate. Oil prices could surge within hours. Since a large share of the world's oil passes through the strait, even a short disruption could remove millions of barrels per day from global markets. Countries that depend heavily on imported energy, especially in Asia, would feel the effects almost instantly. Fuel prices would rise, shipping costs would increase, and energy-intensive industries could face higher production expenses. The ripple effects could spread across the global economy. Higher oil prices often lead to inflation, higher transportation costs, and slower economic growth. Airlines, trucking companies, shipping firms, and manufacturers would all feel the pressure. Financial markets could also react with volatility as investors respond to uncertainty in energy supply. Although small on a map, the Strait of Hormuz sits at the center of the global energy system. Millions of barrels of oil pass through this narrow corridor each day, linking the Persian Gulf to the rest of the world. Its strategic location and limited alternatives make it one of the most important and vulnerable choke points on Earth. As long as the world depends heavily on oil and gas, the Strait of Hormuz will remain a critical gateway and a constant focus of global attention. If you enjoy this deep dive into global geopolitics and trade routes, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel and comment below.